to begin with, I thought I would share the story of communication. So Eric, we were living in Singapore. This was a while ago. And he was working in this office with another friend, another person, colleague named Chung. And if you know anything about Eric, he loves to take charcoal. Like he'll take it, almost prophylactically, just in case he has any problems with digestion. But this day, he happened to be home, and then he left his charcoal in the office. So he calls Hyung and says, Hyung, can you bring the charcoal to the house? Because he lived close to our house. And Hyung says, what, charcoal? What, you eat charcoal? And he says, yes, charcoal, it's it helps with indigestion. And he said, are you sure? And Eric said, yes, it's in the office. I left it there. And Hyung said, there's no way you could be eating this charcoal. This is inedible. And Eric said, no, this is like a proven remedy. And so Hyung said, okay, finally. He said, okay, I'll bring it. And then he comes to the house, he rings the doorbell, and what does he bring? But it's a big bag of barbecue charcoal that happened to be in the office. And, obviously, several of us learned that there are several kinds of charcoal. But anyway, I just thought I shared that humorous story to talk about communication, because this story is about communication, right? So I wanted to go through the whole passage with you. So I'm just going to read the whole passage. It's a little long, but bear with me. Now behold, two of them were traveling that same day to a village called Emmaus, which was 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they talked together of all these things which had happened. So it was, while they conversed and reasoned, that Jesus himself drew near and went with them, but their eyes were restrained so that they did not know him. And he said to them, what kind of conversation is this that you have with one another as you walk and are sad? Then the one whose name was Cleopas answered and said to him, are you the only stranger in Jerusalem, and have you not known the things which happened there in these days? And he said to them, what things? So they said to him, the things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, today is the 3rd day since these things happened. Yes, and certain women of our company who arrived at the tomb early astonished us. When they did not find his body, they came saying that they had also seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. And certain of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see. Then he said to them, O foolish ones, and slow of heart to believe in all that the prophets have spoken. And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. Then they drew near to the village where they were going, And he indicated that he would have gone further, but they constrained him, saying, "Abide with us, for it is toward evening, and the day is far spent." And he went in to stay with them. Now it came to pass, as he sat at the table with them, that he took bread, blessed, and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they knew him, and he vanished from their sight. And they said to one another, "Did not our hearts burn within us while he talked with us on the road, and while he opened the scriptures to us?" So they rose up that very hour and returned to Jerusalem, and found the 11 and those who were with them gathered together, saying, "The Lord is risen indeed and has appeared to Simon." End of reading. So, there's a lot of questions that came to my mind when I was studying this story. But I love this story. This is really one of my favorites in the Bible regarding Jesus, especially because I think it really brings out his character. And but as many Bible stories, it doesn't just come at you. You have to think about it, ruminate on it, and think about these things, because the Bible is like a hidden treasure. But one of the main things that you may have thought of, why did Jesus hide his identity first? Why didn't he just said, "Oh, don't worry, guys. It's me, Jesus. I'm alive. You don't have to worry. All the things that I've been talking about is true." And wouldn't that made them happy? Wouldn't that, that 8-hour walk, they would have been really overjoyed, right? So was he, why would he do that? Was he just trying to try their faith, just to kind of chide them for not believing in him? Is that the character we know of Jesus? Well, the answer in why he hid his identity has to be because he loves them, right? That's the answer to everything that Jesus does. So let's think about why he did that. Can we have the next slide? So just use your imagination and think, what would have happened if that was reversed? If he had revealed his identity and then studied the scriptures with him, what would have happened? What would have been that conversation like, and how would it have been different? Well, they would definitely have believed, right? There would have been no doubt. But how would they come to believe? Right? They would see Jesus resurrected with his, wounded hands, and they would definitely believe, but they would have been overwhelmed by their senses, right? And they would have definitely, their minds would have believed in all the biblical truths, but it's a different process. So they would be overflooded with emotion and feeling. They would have good emotions: love, joy, relief, exaltation, excitement. And Jesus wants us to feel those good feelings, but that is not how he wants us to convince us of his character of goodness and love. It would have been very easy for Jesus to use his supernaturals to change the way that we feel about him, but this is not his preferred way of communicating. If Jesus had reversed the order of the way he did things, it would have taken a lot less time for him to convince them. As you saw in the verses, he went through the whole Bible from Moses on, because they would have already been invested in him. They would have already known. But for one thing, Jesus wanted to spend that time with him in Bible study. He didn't mind that they were spending time. He invested his time with them, and it was worth it for him. He didn't feel that it was a waste of time. And same with all of us. When he is with us, you're the only person on earth. He is regarding you as the only person, and you are one with him, and he is, he values your time. He values your mind, okay? So that's one of the reasons why he didn't reveal himself first. So what is his preferred way of convincing you? Next verse. So that was the time, yes. It says, Isaiah 1:18, come, let us reason together. Yes, and this is how Jesus wants us to know him. He wants us to reason, use our mind to know him. That's why he went through the Bible from Moses to the prophets, going through each one. And what was he revealing? He was revealing that the Messiah had to be born this certain way, humbly, and that he had to die a death on the cross and would be resurrected, all as prophesied in the Old Testament. And he wanted the disciples to realize that of their own accord as they study the Bible with him, as they study the scripture with him. And he says, look at this story and look at that story. And slowly it was coming to them. Next verse. And in Romans 14:5, it says, let everyone be persuaded in their own mind. So, this is the way that, God wants us to know him. Yes, we can know him through nature, we can know him through sermons, but his preferred method is for us to know him through his word, which is so complex and so many stories, but in those stories, it tells the story best of God's character. So he wants us to use our minds to be persuaded of his claims, because if he used his supernatural powers to reveal his identity, that would be bypassing the reasoning powers of the mind. When we can be convinced through the scriptures by seeing that the prophecies point to a suffering Messiah, then we can conclude that this is the way that Jesus had to die. And that would support his being the Messiah. The preferred method of persuading us is to present the evidence and let us make our own conclusions. And when people are given a fair chance of seeing the full amount of evidence for God's love for us, then many will accept Jesus and let him into their hearts. Next. And this is why Jesus said himself that if I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all peoples to myself. So if people saw the reality of Jesus for who he was, it would be such a powerful case of revealing his love that it would be hard for anyone to resist it. Next verse. So this is the opposite of what God's enemies say who he is. They say he's He's like this judge. He's harsh. He's fickle. He's arbitrary. He's mean-spirited, unjust. Isn't that what the world says about God? I don't want to believe in God. Why would he let this world be like the state of the world it is? Why does he allow suffering? Why is he so cruel? Right? Isn't that what we hear all the time? They say he's either weak and cannot do anything about the unfairness, or he doesn't care and allows it to happen, which would make him cruel. So, my case for you is that is not the case. God and Jesus in God in the flesh reveals his character to us. He is the opposite of those things. He wants to reveal himself. He is fair, he is kind, he is just, and he wants to make his case known. He actually wants to reveal himself to us. Next. And this is not to say that God doesn't want us to have emotions. Of course, he wants us to feel love and joy and excitement, empathy, even anger. But the difference is that he doesn't want us to be ruled by emotion. The emotions have to be under the subjugation of the mind. Just use your memory, and think of the last time you got angry. Maybe it was this morning. I'm not gonna confess, but it may have happened this morning. But what happens to you when you get angry? Are you capable of making good judgments when you're angry? Or other emotions, even, these days with social media, our senses are so bombarded with everything, 2-3 second video clips that go so fast, and we're supposed to process that, but all those things, they're not, this is how we are being used by the enemy, honestly, to overrule our reasoning. Next. So Satan's methods are opposite of God's. Jesus is always what? Is he banging at the door, or is he knocking? He's knocking. Satan doesn't knock. He doesn't knock at your door. He sneaks in. He barges in. He will trick you into opening the door. He doesn't want to reason with you. He wants to overwhelm your senses, your sights, your hearing, your smelling. He doesn't want you to think. He wants you to be numbed so that you'll be led around and influenced the way Satan wants you to be. Next slide. So I'm going to go back to the question of why Jesus didn't reveal his identity at first. And that was because he didn't want to use his authority for them to believe him. That just because he was Jesus, that they would be forced to trust his words. That just because he claimed he was who he was, they should believe. Unlike many worldly important people, he doesn't use his authority to get his way. And one reason for this is that he doesn't want to overwhelm them with emotion. And this is him not exerting his authority to persuade people. Next slide. And, if you think about it, one of the reasons why he had so many problems with the Jewish leaders of the time is exactly because he didn't use his authority as they did. But Jesus told them this: "Woe to you, Pharisees, because you love the most important seats in the synagogues and respectful greetings in the marketplaces." So this is what was typical of the Jewish leaders, to show their authority, say, "Everybody follow me because I have learned and I have special messages from God, and this is what you should believe." And this is exactly what Jesus was trying to show, that God's kingdom is not like that. Next. And this aspect of a leader not taking advantage of his status was so foreign to the Jewish leaders and the people that it was frowned upon. In the upper room during the Last Supper, it was Jesus who wrapped a towel around himself and started washing the dirty feet of his disciples. He didn't think it too lowly to do such a menial chore. The action of washing the feet of his disciples is an example of how Jesus didn't use his authority to control others or get his way. Next slide. And Jesus not imposing his authority is most powerfully and poignantly displayed on the cross. That cross where he suffered and died, before the cross, on the cross, he did not mutter a word of defense. And as Matt Perez had so beautifully pointed out, during his trial, he did not defend himself when the Pilate questioned him, because even during those last minutes, he was wanting to persuade, giving that person, Pilate, another chance, one more chance for him to accept Jesus as a Messiah. So that victory on the cross, so hard won, so difficult for Jesus, and yet with that victory, he does not impose that on us. Your freedom is so important to him that this beautiful gift, he doesn't force you to accept it. He values you too much to force you. He gives you the evidence saying, "I love you this much," and allows you to choose. It pains Jesus to see us not taking that gift he offers, but he is always a gentleman. He's always going to be knocking at the door. Next slide. One takeaway I got from studying this story was how Jesus never gives up on us. Those two disciples had so much evidence of his divinity, and they were speaking the very words that should have convinced them that all the things that Jesus had said was true. And yet they're going, "Oh, but we thought that he was the Messiah." And where were they heading? Emmaus, which is the opposite direction of what Jesus had said, told them to go. So they were disobedient, they were unfaithful and disbelieving. And yet, what does Jesus do? He comes down and walks those 7 miles with them and talks with them as if they were the only people on the earth. After his big victory on the cross, he takes the time to walk with them and to convince them through the scriptures of who he was. And one of the reasons was that he sees the heart. Yeah, he saw that, yes, they were groping, they were hurt, they were disappointed, and yet there was something in their hearts that longed to see him as the Messiah. And he took that little glimmer and he came down to reveal to them and reveal his heart to them. So, isn't that beautiful how he condescends to our level? No matter where we are in our faith walk, he comes down to our level at the lowest, littlest bit of faith, and he says, I see you. I see you walking. I see you wondering about me. I am here. I am here for you. And yes, I am the Messiah, but I love you like you're the only person on earth. Yeah. Well, that's basically my message, but I wanted to convey and share with you, yes, this is our last moments of 2022. And just to think about how God has been there for you throughout this year. If you can take a moment to really think about how he has walked with you on that road to Emmaus. When you are wondering, when you are suffering, when you are, questioning, God, why am I in this situation? Can't you do something for me? He was with you. And this story revealed to me how he comes to our level. He comes to wherever we are. It doesn't matter if you've been a Christian for 50 years or 1 year or not even a Christian. But if you are struggling, if you are thinking, even if you are thinking about him, he is right there with you through the Holy Spirit guiding you to his heart.